the webinar. Today, FOE Japan is holding this event about if nuclear power is green, about the energy situation in EU and the EU taxonomy. Thank you very much for participating. I will be your facilitator for today. My name is Kaksa from FOE Japan. I think maybe some of you may already be aware from watching the news, but in the EU, there is a system called the EU Taxonomy, and nuclear power and gas are the EU Taxonomy. They are debating whether or not to include nuclear power and gas into that, and that system will helps to determine whether or not investment should be made in those areas. And so this has been disputed by many specialists and other people as well. And so by including nuclear power and gas in the EU taxonomy, there was a draft in order to include that, and that will go under deliberation at the EU Parliament. And if the majority of parliamentarians vote in favor, then it will be included in the EU taxonomy. And so we will talk about what is the background of why this is the current situation and what kind of discussions are being had in Europe. And so today we have some people who will speak about those aspects of this issue. And today, we had planned for this event to end at 6:30 p.m. Japan time, but because of some changes in the event, it will actually be until 6:45 p.m. And so this is the this topic. And then as an introduction, Mitsuda from FOE Japan will introduce about the EU taxonomy. And then next, Jan Varode from FOE Germany, from who is an atomic energy campaigner, will speak about the EU taxonomy and the energy situation in Germany. And then Michiko Kurita, who is a writer and journalist from Belgium, will speak about this issue from the perspective of a citizen of EU. And Obayashi Mika from the Renewable Energy Institute will speak about security of energy and the shift in energy that we need. And at the very end, we'll have a Q&A time. And so if you have any questions, please click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and enter your questions. Just a little bit about FOE Japan. FOE Japan was founded in 1980, and it is a Japanese environmental organization. We are fighting for various issues, including nuclear power, against nuclear power and environmental issues. FOE Japan is part of the Friends of the Earth International Network. And today we will be hearing from Jan Varode, who is from FOE Germany, BUND, which is also a member of Friends of the Earth. So from here, we would like to move on to the session. First, from FOE Japan, Mitsuda will be speaking about the EU taxonomy. Hello, everyone. This is Mitsuda from FOE Japan. I will share my screen now. Okay, so from me, I would like to introduce a little bit about what the EU taxonomy is. The EU taxonomy is to promote environmentally sustainable investments, and it controls activities in 6 environmental areas into these categories. And so there are a lot of environmentally sustainable investments, but one of the objectives is to prevent greenwashing. The 6 categories are climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, sustainable use and conservation of water and marine resources, transition to a circular economy, prevention and control of environmental pollution, and conservation and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems. However, for these 6 categories, it is said that it should apply to one of these categories, but it is said that another of the conditions is that it should do no significant harm to any of the goals, or it is also referred to as DNSH, and it should meet the minimum safeguards such as the guiding principles on business and human rights. And there's an EU technical expert group on sustainable finance, or TEG, and this group has a technical screening criteria that they have created, and it needs to meet this criteria as well. However, when we look back on the past, this TEG technical expert group has recommended that nuclear power plants do not meet the DNSH criteria, and that's what they have recommended to the EU Commission. However, in July of 2020, the European Commission asked Joint Research Center to evaluate the nuclear power plants for DNSH. And the JRC submitted in April of 2021 that nuclear power plants are DNSH compliant, and that's what they submitted in an evaluation report. In 2021, the EU taxonomy entered into force, but at that point, nuclear power and gas were not included. However, at the end of 2021, the EU Commission leaked, there were some articles leaked that revealed that the Commission wanted to include nuclear power and gas in the EU taxonomy. And in January of this year, the Commission published a draft, complementary regulation draft, including technical criteria for nuclear power and gas. And during that time, we were quite surprised and at this new move, but there were a lot of discussions about that. On January 6th, the US, Germany, France, and UK, the former chairman of nuclear regulatory commissions and other members published a joint statement saying that nuclear power is not a realistic means of combating climate change. And on January 11th, many Japanese civil society groups, including FOA Japan, 261 groups, we wrote an open letter saying that nuclear power plants from uranium mining all the way to operation and decommissioning emit many harmful materials to the environment, and so it is the exact opposite of sustainability and environmental protection. And also in January, on the 21st, one of the regulating bodies of the EU taxonomy, which is the platform for sustainable finance, published a statement that said that nuclear power cannot be recognized as sustainable economic activity.
Also in Japan, former Prime Minister Koizumi and other former prime ministers, 5 of them, had written to the EU. Many oppositions have been voiced. However, on the 2nd of February, the European Commission approved moving on with including nuclear and gas and passed it. The next step, it needs to go to the EU, the Council of Europe, as well as the European Parliament. And then after it passes, it will actually go into effect. In the European Parliament, this is the actual legislative body, which is similar to the Japanese Parliament system. There are also groups which are the committees. There has been a joint committee between the Environment Committee as well as the Economic and Finance Committee, and these 2 committees objected to including these powers into the taxonomy and delivered it to the European Commission. There will be a decision made by the European Parliament in the early part of July. If it does not pass the parliament, this change will not happen. However, if the parliament passes, it will go into effect. The details of the actual taxonomy will be explained by Jan. There are many voices that have been voiced even in Japan and overseas regarding the questionable aspect of including these power sources. One is from the investor groups. The IIGCC, which is the group of investors regarding climate change, is saying that they feel that it will confuse investors. The Dutch pension fund mentioned that the taxonomy cannot be used as a greenwash tool. The Euro SIF, which is the forum for the European socially responsible investment, says that it will actually reduce the reliability of the taxonomy and will be actually used as have a massively negative effect. These are the comments that have, these are only a few of the comments that have been voiced. I would like to introduce Jan. He will explain regarding EU taxonomy as the energy policies in Germany. Thank you. Jan, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. It's a great honor to contribute to your event and to speak about the EU taxonomy and energy politics in Germany. As you already said, I work for Friends of the Earth Germany and in Berlin. And I'm mostly working as a campaigner for nuclear energy politics and working about the nuclear phase out in Germany. So I will give a presentation about two things. On the one hand, I will talk about the EU taxonomy, and then the second part, I will talk about the German energy politics. Can you please click the next slide? So this is the first slide, and we'll talk about in the first section about the EU taxonomy and the debate about it, including nuclear and fossil gas, and then also looking a bit in the history of the EU taxonomy. And as you see in my slide, I already gave away my conclusion. The EU taxonomy is the biggest greenwashing of nuclear and fossil gas that ever happened. And it actually should have prevented this and should have prevented from greenwashing. So the next slide. Yeah, the starting point will be that Europe is a challenging and extensive transformation towards a climate neutral society. That's for all of the countries all over the world, but one of the biggest challenges is to transform the economy, and this transformation requires large investments. Therefore, a reorientation of capital flows towards sustainable investments is needed. And actually, this is the core or the basis of the EU taxonomy. So it is approximately 350 billion euros per year needed to achieve the climate targets of 2030. That's a huge amount of money. And a lot of private investors and companies are already trying to invest in green bonds and green products. But there's, as I called it, a jungle of labels that try to make everything green, but that isn't really green. So the EU took an action and introduced the EU taxonomy, and it was planned to be a scientific-based classification of sustainable economic activities. And as already said, it should prevent from greenwashing. Can you click the next slide? The next. Thank you so much. So what is this regulation all about, and what is sustainable? as already said, it should promote the EU environmental goals, for example, climate protection, but it also should follow the do not significant harm principle. So looking at nuclear power, you can argue, which we won't, but you can argue that it contributes to climate protection, but it violates the paradigm of circular economy because the nuclear waste problem. So it contradicts the do not significant harm principle. And it should comply with the minimum standard of social standards. So, for example, labor protection rights and also land protection rights. This is really important when we talk about uranium mining. And the history of the taxonomy is quite older. It goes back into 2018 and earlier. But in July 2020, the framework regulation got into effect and already came into power. But what didn't happen was the special technical criteria were adopted, and they needed to be regulated in different legislation acts. So can you click the next slide? This led to a big debate about nuclear and gas in Europe. So the controversy over nuclear power was already told because the EU expert group, the technical expert group, stated in a report that nuclear power is not sustainable and doesn't meet the criteria of do not significant harm. And there were also strict criteria for the inclusion of natural gas. But after that, huge debate came in place, and lobby interests, but also member states achieved a reassessment of nuclear power. And the EU Joint Research Center issued a new report. The center is known as a pro-nuclear center, and it works in Germany and has already issued a lot of pro-nuclear studies. This one was also, it also stated that all problems, including final repository, were solved. So they say nuclear power is green. And we had like a bit of a horse trading, I would say, between France and Germany. And on the one hand, we have like the French nuclear power, the dependency on nuclear power. And on the other hand, we have Germany depending on natural gas. I will talk about this on the next slide, please. Can you click the next? Thank you so much. So we have, this is the situation in Europe, like put a bit on a simple side, but we have on the one hand, the supporters of nuclear power, and on the other hand, the people who are against nuclear power. And we see that especially France and Germany are opposing each other. On the one hand, France is in urgent need of money for their nuclear fleet. They have a lot of reactors in France, over 50, and they're aging, and they need at least 100 billion euros by 2020 to retrofit their reactors. Also, the EDF, the energy company in France, is in urgent need for money. They have 42 billion euros debt right now. So new funding is not so easy for them because they have a cap on the electricity prices, and they try to find new ways in people investing in nuclear. On the other hand, in Germany, gas was seen as a supporting technology, or as they call it, a bridge towards the coal phase out. So a lot of people from Germany, and also the last government wanted to include gas in the taxonomy. Also, a lot of Eastern European countries wanted to have nuclear in their taxonomy to phase out coal. And on the other hand, there are also a lot of supporters for gas. The German government was, as I said, a bit of divided. They didn't really offer or didn't lift the veto they had, but Merkel gave up the German veto at the EU summit, and then the way was clear for gas, but also nuclear power in the taxonomy. Can you click the next slide, please?
It's going a little bit slower because the interpretation is taking longer than your English.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm so sorry. It's totally okay. So what criteria have been included in the taxonomy for nuclear power? I don't want to recap all the criteria, but I want to point out some parts. So new nuclear power plants and also the retrofits of outdated reactors are included in this, investments in these two things. And nuclear power plants needed to be licensed until 2045 in this regulation, and also small modular reactors and not now built concepts are also included. There are a lot of criteria for nuclear to be green included that are already in effect. So for example, they need to be at the state of the art, and they need to be a storage system for the low-level waste. But there's also some new stuff. For example, there must be a final disposal site in operation by 2050. There is no really measurement of how to punish misbehavior, and this is quite hard for us to think about a way to say, okay, now we are investing in nuclear, and in 2050 there should be an operational disposal site, and how do we punish that if it's not happened then, because the money already is gone into it. I will not tell you all about the gas thing, but there are also a lot of things in the gas criteria that are a bit softened and also in favor of the fossil gas industry. But nuclear power is for friends of the earth and will never be sustainable, not only but also because of the nuclear waste. I will go on to the next slide. As I said, nuclear power is neither sustainable nor helpful for climate protection. I really liked your video. It already summed up all of the parts that and talking points that I wanted to give here, but especially concerning the taxonomy, the nuclear waste problem does violate the do not significant harm principle. To date, there's no site for the nuclear waste in the world, and at least 40,000 generations will have to live with that dangerous and high radiation waste. And so on this point alone, it's not sustainable to produce power by nuclear plants. But also, as you already said, the big danger of reactor catastrophes is still a point not to invest in nuclear power anymore. I will go on to the next slide. Thank you. So what's the current state of the debate? The German government is clearly against the taxonomy with nuclear power, but they supported the idea, at least until the war, now it's a bit different, but they supported the idea of including nuclear gas as a bridge to the coal phase out. And also, as I said, the old government softened the criteria for gas and adopted a lot of criteria from the gas industry. The EU Commission published the taxonomy legislation in February this year, and it passed it to the Parliament and the Council. The Parliament and its committees of the Parliament, or the committees of the Parliament, rejected the Commission with the taxonomy with gas and nuclear, and the Parliament will be on vote on July the 6th. Now we can see like a lot of members of the Parliament criticize the draft from different arguments, also from the sustainable view and environmental reasons that nuclear and gas are not green. But there are also further key arguments. For example, it is not a way of democracy to put this highly debated act into this delegated act. It should be an open discussion about it. So, but still approximately 100 votes are missing to get rid of the taxonomy. And we were looking, we're really excited about what will happen on the 6th of July when this vote will be given. And if it doesn't work, what will happen if the taxonomy comes into effect? Austria and Luxembourg already announced legal actions against it, and we as Friends of the Earth Germany demand that the government of Germany will follow this. Next slide, please. Because there are a lot of possible consequences of the taxonomy that could happen. First of all, there are really direct consequences, like all economic activities are labeled green, complied with the taxonomy. And if the taxonomy comes into force, financial products will be green, even though there is natural gas and nuclear in it. And also, a lot of institutions and investors said that they want to orientate themselves at the taxonomy and want to label their financial products due to the taxonomy. So there's a huge danger that the taxonomy steers billions of euros into the wrong direction. In addition, the taxonomy could also signal to other countries, like non-European countries, and they could also be influenced by that and adopt their own taxonomy. Also, there's the great danger that public money, this is also already discussed, like from European funds, could flow into nuclear power, and also European funds could be orientated at the EU taxonomy. Nuclear power projects will have a higher chance of realization because today it's only possible to realize or to build nuclear power with a state help and not with private money, but that could be much more easier. And also there's a huge lack of investments in truly sustainable economic activities, for example, in renewable energies. I put in some quotes of the German newspaper that there will be 500 billion euros investments in the nuclear power plants, and that the EDF will gain profit from the EU taxonomy. The next slide. I also put in some quotes of the financial sector. It's kind of funny because I put in some of the same quotes as were already mentioned, but I've never thought that I would put a quote of a BlackRock investment statement in an environmental NGO slide, but also mostly all of the financial sector and all the companies say they wouldn't invest in nuclear and gas. And also the BlackRock strategist said that. And there are also a lot of pension funds that don't want to invest in gas and nuclear. And as you said, also the institutional investor group on climate change said they don't want to invest in gas and nuclear. Also, the industry says that especially a lot of companies from the renewable energy sector say that this is not a good idea, and they're really unhappy and worried that investments will flow in the wrong direction. But also the nuclear industry, like the French nuclear industry and also the Russian nuclear industry will profit from this endeavor and will get a lot of money. So Greenpeace said that the Russian gas industry will get a loan 4 billion euros per year additionally if the taxonomy comes into place. The next slide, please. So what is the reaction of the civil society? I brought along some pictures of the protest we made, but also a lot of other groups all around Europe. And there was not a huge outcry before 2020, but after it was stated that gas and nuclear power will be a part of the taxonomy, there were a lot of people protesting against it. And alone in Germany, there were 340,000 people who signed the petition of the Friends of the Earth Germany. And in addition, there was so many support from all over the countries in Europe, but also all over the world. We were really happy to see your letters and protest actions. And there will be a huge protest in on July the 5th in Strasbourg when the parliament will vote on the taxonomy. Next slide, please. So to sum it all up, we will. I brought you two charts about how the citizens and how the investors think about nuclear power, and over 80% of the German citizens say that investing in nuclear power is not sustainable, and over almost 90% of the investors, like there were 200 big companies interviewed, say that nuclear power should not be in a sustainable taxonomy. So we have the market says no, the government, the public says no, but still it's in the taxonomy. Please, the next slide. So in the second part, I will talk about the energy politics in Germany, and I will give you some insights about the current situation. This year, at the end of December, all nuclear power plants will be shut down and the phase out will be completed. That's actually what we hope, but the horrible Russian war in Ukraine has fueled the debate about lifetime expansion of existing reactors in Germany. The next slide, please. Yeah, so I first we'll start to talk about the most recent development, which shocked us all in Europe, Russia's war in Ukraine, where a lot of people died and were injured and lost their homes. And we were really moved by this, but it also affects the nuclear industry and also the nuclear power plants. We talked a lot about this with our Ukrainian friends. So the war affects nuclear power plants not only by this combat operations and the military action around it, but also because of untargeted firing or the personal overload. For example, in Chernobyl, the crew had to work like for almost 3 weeks without any break and without changing. And also this could lead to mistakes, and this could also lead to horrible disasters. There's also a great risk in losing electricity energy, and the reliable. They need to be, or they need to rely on reactor on power, on emergency power generation, and there's a need for a good logistics to get diesel to this emergency power generators to keep them running, and to bring diesel to a plant could be really impossible during the war. So we are really worried about this situation, and we want to state that no nuclear power plant in the world is designed for war. That said, let's switch to the next chart. Yeah, keeping this danger in mind, there are still 3 reactors running in Germany until this year, December, 1 in the north and 2 in the south. They're in this little map in dark red. And we have also different other facilities that will be running just over December 2020. So there's a research reactor and also a uranium enrichment plant and a fuel factory that continue to run without any limit. And every 10th nuclear power plant in the world will be supplied by German fuel rods still. And we have 16 interim storage facilities where the current nuclear waste is stored, but there is no a long-term nuclear waste facility. Please, the next slide. So where are we now? The energy electricity generation in Germany is, or the situation is shown at the left side. We have 47% electricity generation from renewable energies and only 6% nuclear power, but there is still a lot of fossil fuel generating electricity in Germany. You can see on the right side the last 30 years. In the last 10 years, the share of renewable energy in electricity generation doubled. So there's a lot of good things going on, and everything is awesome. And not really. I would tell you about that in the next chart. Because if we look at the primary energy consumption, so including everything like industry processes, mobility, and heat generation, we are highly dependent on natural gas. 32% of the primary energy consumption comes from natural gas, only 3% of nuclear power, and 18% of renewable energy in Germany. And this is a huge problem because natural gas is not only needed for electricity production, but also for heating. Every 50% of the German households is using gas to heat their homes. And it's also needed for industry processes, like as a product, but also for heating their So we are highly dependent on gas in Germany for our energy consumption. And there's another huge problem. Can you click the next slide? Because most of the energy, most of the natural gas is imported from Russia. We have like 55% of the natural gas of Germany comes from Russia. And it could have been even more if the Nord Stream 2 pipeline wasn't canceled in February 2020. So that said, keep in mind that we have a lot of natural gas that is needed for heating and industry, but still, and that's the next slide, the debate on nuclear power began. So for all of you who can read German, you can see a bit of a newspaper articles, but for all of you who can't, I will just give you some translation so that you can see what the current political situation is. We have, on the one hand, or I will just give you some insights about the German government first. Since the end of 2021, we have a new government that consists of Social Democrats, Green Party, and the Liberals. And the Green Party is in charge of the Ministry for Energy and Ministry for Environment. And they both opposed nuclear power, and they said there will be no lifetime extension of nuclear power. And also a lot of environmental organizations and the companies that operate the nuclear power said, no way, we will not extend the lifetime of nuclear power. On the other hand, there's a huge debate about in the conservatives that say we need to keep the power plants up and running for at least 3 to 5 years. And one part of the German government, the Liberals, are also in favor of lifetime extension of the nuclear power plants. And what is really shocking to us is that the public opinion, a lot of people said that they are also in favor now to keep the nuclear power plants up. Until this March, a lot of people were opposing nuclear power, but it kind of changed a bit. So we, as Friends of the Earth, are all in all really careful what will happen, but we are optimistic that the phase out will be completed this year. The next slide, please. This is, so what did the German government do? They I will just give you a short introduction. They said that they want to import gas from Qatar, and they want to build up 14 new LNG terminals, liquid gas. They will also put in backup decommissioned coal-fired power plants, and they want to shift natural gas to heating more and instead of electricity generation. And that said, after all these measurements came in place, they also talked about energy saving. But for us as Friends of the Earth, we were like strongly saying we need to build more renewable energies, but we also make strong cuts and make more energy savings. So the next slide, please. Why is nuclear power not a solution for us, and why don't we want to keep them up and running? So first of all, we need to say that over 20% of the uranium used in the European Union comes from Russia, and another 20% comes from Kazakhstan. nuclear power does not solve the heating crisis. It wouldn't solve any problems because we're still exporting electricity. And also the nuclear power plants are scheduled for shutdown. So there's not really enough fuel rods. There's no people who can work there. There's not really much spare parts. And also all the safety checks that are needed haven't been done in the last 3 years. So there needs to be a lot of checking, and it wouldn't help us in the crisis at the end of the year. But all in all, nuclear power is not safe enough and not a sustainable energy for us to help us in the future. And also in Germany, the search for a repository and the nuclear power is kind of highly connected. So if you will do the lifetime extension, it will also end in a huge conflict about finding a repository for the nuclear waste. Let me just sum everything up in the last slide. So for us, the EU taxonomy is not about any bans or prohibitions. It's about the classification of sustainable economic activities. And we as Friends of the Earth say we need a taxonomy, but we don't need one with gas and nuclear power. So if a country wants to build gas, it's totally possible. But if we want to lead the financial flows, we need to put them in green and renewable energies. So the aim was to prevent this greenwashing, but instead of doing that, it is kind of insane that nuclear power and gas was included, even though it is scientifically proven that it's not sustainable or could contribute to protect the climate. The taxonomy and the sustainable label is losing its credibility, and experts say that they already, that it already will not be the standard that they wanted to have the taxonomy to be in the market. But the decision-making process is not over. It will still be a chance to end it at the 6th of July, where the Parliament will make its decision. And the Energiewende in Germany, the transition of energy has still a long way to go for reaching its goal. I hope I could make some points to say that we are still at 50% of renewable energy, but we are highly dependent on gas. And in the current energy crisis, nuclear power is not a solution in Germany, but it's still debated. Because for us, nuclear power is still highly dangerous, and we should not invest anymore in this, and also should not prolong the lifetime. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I can answer them at the last part in the FAQ.
Yang,
thank you very much. There are multiple questions who are coming in the Q&A. The questions will be answered during the Q&A session. Let's move on to the next part of our event, which will be from the journalist who is currently living in Belgium. She is a European Union citizen. Her name is Michiko Kurihara. There are many specialists and people who are much knowledgeable than I am about the technology of this, but I am currently living in and also a citizen of the EU, but also was born and raised in Japan. And I wanted to explain from both perspectives regarding what is happening in the EU. You may already know a lot about what I am talking about, but I want to summarize from my perspective. I put in a lot of photographs here. Belgium is right between France and Germany, the two opposing countries, and we are kind of stuck in the middle. But also at the same time, the key, the European Commission is located in this our company, and also the council is located here as well, and also the parliament is located in Belgium as well. This is the reason why it is seen as maybe the capital of EU or the headquarters of EU. It is often called that. On the right top, this is the commission, the parliament, and this is the legislative body. And the proposals are raised from the parliament and then sent over to the commission, the 27 countries, delegates from these countries, people who are specializing in certain areas, for example, the investment and the finance and also environment, will discuss in this area. And then at the very bottom, this is the parliament. And there is a big parliament forum in Brussels as well, so that EU decisions come from the Commission as a proposal, and it goes through the Council and also the Parliament and is discussed in these forums. And if it doesn't pass, then it gets sent back, and many changes are made and improvements are made. And then it goes to the next step to see if it will pass the next time around. So this is the process that is followed. And for the legislative body is the parliament, and also the commission also plays a very strong role.
会議になるので、本会議はそもそも欧州議会が存在したストラスブール、つまりフランス。
And the main parliamentary debates take place in Strasbourg. So I did not know a lot about the EU taxonomy, even though I am currently living in the EU as a Japanese person. But I have heard from people that nuclear power or gas is going to be included, and I was quite shocked. I thought, EU, I didn't think you were going to do that. And as a Japanese person, I think that in Japan, we are very used to accepting these things. Although in Japan, we have lots of experience with nuclear weapons and nuclear power incidents. But I always thought that EU was different. It was much more progressive in terms of incorporating renewable energy, and I was very proud of that aspect, and so I was quite shocked when I heard this. And I think that Jan did a great job of explaining all of these things, but in the EU, we currently have the EU Commission, and the president of this commission is someone from Germany. And from 2019, she became the incumbent, and during her time, every person has a basic strategy that they put into place, and her name is Ursula von der Leyen, and she has called her plan the EU Green Deal, which you may have already heard of. And what this is that they will target to have zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 or 55% reduction from 1990 levels by 2030. And so for EU, there's a lot of preparation that has gone into these goals, and there's a very specific roadmap and many detailed strategy plans for each sector, and so it is a very meticulously planned out strategy, and I thought it was a very great strategy, and I was very impressed by it. Also, from the sustainable development of people, this is something that has also been discussed in the debate of economic development, and so I think I might mention this later again, but everything that relates to the environment, there's something called the precautionary principle, which means that anything that we can't take back, we should not do, and that's one of the basic principles, and it's in the Constitution type documents, and so I thought that was just a given. And in terms of environment, I think that this region takes pride in leading on environmental issues, and so the situation in which nuclear power and gas, if it were to be included and considered so-called sustainable, then other regions would follow in their footsteps, and they would say, if the EU is doing it, then we can as well. And so that is also something that I am quite concerned about. And also, as you know, the pandemic took place, and there was a new term, green recovery, which means that the EU was working very hard on a sustainable recovery. And so I was very proud of everything that the EU was doing. Within the EU Green Deal, it has stated clearly that it would be the end of the fossil fuel era. But I am not sure why this new situation has taken place despite these things. As a citizen of the EU, I thought that I should not remain silent. I was looking in January, as you know, the EU taxonomy states where people should be making their investments, and it directs investors. And so I was kind of sitting back and reassured, but then all of a sudden this new discussion about nuclear power and gas came up in January, and there was this complementary delegated act that they wanted to add, and that information was leaked at the end of last year during the pandemic when the economy was in a very bad state. And so as someone from Japan, we have Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Lucky Dragon number 5, and all these different nuclear related disasters. I didn't want to remain silent as someone from Japan. And I think that because people in Japan have faced all these things, people in Japan have raised their voices. And so as someone living in Europe, I felt an obligation to also raise my voice. There's someone I know who is from Nagasaki, and they always say that they're from Nagasaki, but I don't want to rely on these things. And so before we even discuss if nuclear power is good for the environment or not, we need to look at the human rights aspects and social justice aspects, and the do no significant harm principle. The precautionary principle was the most important essence of EU, and so I'm very angry and concerned about this current state. As Jan stated earlier, I wrote at the end that lobbying isn't just an issue in Japan. In Japan, there's a lot of horse trading within the higher ups in Japan, but I thought that in EU, there's a lot of strong lobbying, which is a fact. And for example, in Brussels, from my perspective, I think that in Brussels, when there's a new law or a draft for a law, there are some people in parliament who are able to oppose, and there are thousands of different lobby organizations. And then there's also environmental organizations and industrial organizations. In Japan, I think that there are lots of different organizations like that. And so all of these organizations exist in Brussels and they hold a lot of power. And so when I was thinking about what I could do as one person living in the EU, I thought that I could submit an opposition petition to EU Parliament. And this is one of the systems that we have in place as part of democracy. Some people think of democracy and they only think of elections, but aside from elections, when sometimes there's debate about whether this is functioning as part of this system. But as Jan stated earlier, just to add to what he said, the EU Commission, when they want to add something, the 27 member states they give citizens a chance to oppose this at the EU Parliament. And so Boris Johnson always says that the EU decides on everything, but we do have the right to choose our representatives. And also at Parliament, we have the opportunity to voice our opinions. And there is a citizens initiative that about 100 people in order to do that motion, but if there are more than 100 people that are living in EU member states, we can submit a new law. And another thing that we can do is to submit an opposing petition. And so I thought that I would try to do that. The EU Parliament is similar to Japan in some ways. Usually from left to the right wing, we line up in that order, but because there are people representing all these different countries, there are more than 50,000 political parties, and so their categories slightly differently. At the last election, the German parties centered around the Green Party was able to attain many seats in parliament. And the new liberal parties and other political parties also increased their seats. So there's a lot of chaos happening in the parliament. And there are also many committees within the EU Parliament. There are over 30 of these committees. And within those, the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee, as well as the Environment, Public Health, and Food Safety Committee, also referred to as ENVI. These are the ones that opposed the draft in June, and next it will be brought to vote on July 6th. But there's a petitions committee, and I submitted to this committee. I am able to submit that I am in opposition of this, and it was better than to have more people aside from myself, but I was in a rush and I wanted to submit that in January. And so I got together with a friend from Germany and the Netherlands. And so we said that as Japanese people living in Europe for a very long time, we cannot stand by and let this happen. And so we submitted a petition based on that, and it is still happening. It is a bit difficult to sign this petition as easily as it is on some websites such as change.org. But if you're living in Japan or Canada or anywhere, you can still support this petition, even if you're not a citizen of the EU. And so I ask that you support our petition. If you go to the EU Parliament petition site, I can give you more information later. There, if you register to this site and look up EU taxonomy or my number 2022-0088, I think it was. If you can search for that, you can support the petition. And so I ask for you to do that. And finally, when I talk about EU, there are now 27 countries. And so that's a population of 450 million people. There's the European Commission and the Council of European Union and the Council of Europe. And those are located in Brussels. The Council of Europe is located in Strasbourg. But there is also something called the Council of Europe, which is not an EU organization, but they mainly work on human rights issues, and this is located in Strasbourg. And in Luxembourg and Austria, I was talking about how they might take legal action, and this would take place at the Court of Justice of the European Union in Luxembourg. And that's where we think they will bring this legal action to. And so that is all for my presentation. If you have any questions, please let me know later. Thank you very much, Kurita-san. We can share the petition link and how to do that later on. And so thank you, and we'll see you again at the Q&A portion.
Now, next, we would like to ask Mika Obayashi from Renewable Energy Institute. Thank you for the introduction. I have some presentation material, but a lot of the content overlaps with many of the other presentations, so I want to quickly go through some of the key points. This is the reason for energy transformation and natural energy. This slide shows that the renewable energy is now the world's cheapest form of energy, of electricity. And 4/3 of the world's GDP is moving to renewable energy. And then this is looking at, for the past 40 years, we see that reduction of cost in renewable, of solar power, as well as wind. At the end of the year, 550 gigawatts has been generated through solar power. And in 1 year, we can see the rise in 1 year, which was 130 gigawatts. This is for wind power. Last year, for the first time, solar power surpassed wind power, and 825 gigawatts were generated through wind. This is there are new technologies coming into wind, including the offshore generation. We can also see that these are the amounts shown in the graph. And each of the countries are putting up major target and goals. EU and many of the EU countries have committed to large targets for moving to renewable energy, such as moving to 100% renewable energy by 2035, which is from Germany. And in Japan, 36% to 38% by 2030 is the target for Japan. And we can see that the renewable energy is still quite low in Japan. Looking at the situation for the energy crisis, there are many activities that are going on in many of the countries and organizations around the world. And EU is coming through Repower EU, to look at both the reduction of energy use as well as renewable energy. And Germany is now looking at the Easter package and also trying to and also committed to stopping the nuclear power as planned. These are some of the conditions of the various countries. The other day, we conducted an event, a webinar, and Thomas Cavalier made a very interesting comparison that I would like to introduce to you today. This is looking at the cost of fossil fuel. This is not just the cost of the fuel itself. We also need to look at the price in terms of the heat, because it is very difficult to show that into energy cost. When we look at the highest cost of fossil fuel, which is oil, when we look at the comparison of per barrel crude oil and how that compares to electricity cost, this is the graph itself. And we can see that in the past, it was about $105 per barrel, and then that cost is about $65 to $70. But this is megawatt hours, but the actual renewable energy now is around 30 to 80 in that range, 80 being the offshore wind power, and then solar being about 30. This is the range of renewable energy, so that many of the cheaper forms of renewable energy is cheaper than oil. And the next expensive is gas. And this is the cost of gas as well as the megawatt hours. And looking at the cost, it used to be about $7, and that which meant 24 megawatt hours, which is about 2.4 cents or 3 cents. But what is happening now is it's actually moved this much, meaning that the price has gone up this much, and that there is no way we could actually burn it as a source of energy to make it economically viable. Now, looking at coal, in the past, coal was quite cheap, and therefore it was about $8 per megawatt hour, $8 per megawatt hours. But now, what is the situation is it is like this, meaning that coal is also not viable for a source of energy. Now, looking at nuclear power, this is the study that we published 2 years ago. In the first slide, it shows that the nuclear power is the most costly, most expensive form of energy. And Japan, we are currently trying to restart many of the reactors, which means that the process that is required in terms of including the safety of the existing reactors will take a lot more in terms of additional investment to restart these reactors. This is the policy that has been taken in Japan, which is further increasing the cost of nuclear power and also the life of the nuclear power reactors. Also, when we look at the 40 to 60 years, the period of actual usage of the facility also needs to be considered when we calculate the kilowatt hours. Even if we look at the minimum cost required for restarting the nuclear powers, the cost is going to be about 13 yen, 12 yen to 13 yen per kilowatt hours. This is the cost situation. This is a DP published data which we made into a graph. We can see that in the world, renewable energy, excluding dams, have been surpassed nuclear. I will skip some of the slides that are looking at the Repower EU, which is to look at renewable energy and also reduction of energy use. And these are the policies that have been taken in Germany, which I will skip as well. In Japan, we often look at the policies that are being followed in the UK, which is to looking at making it 25% of nuclear. But if you look at the actual content, it is really relying more on solar and wind to create a net zero electricity system. In order to do this, they are trying to reduce the 13-year development period to half that, to reduce the amount of time that is required for developing offshore wind power, and to try to reduce this to create 40 gigawatt more by 2030. And that the UK will become the Saudi Arabia of wind power. UK is currently creating 14 gigawatt of solar power, and then they are trying to make that 5-fold to 70 gigawatts by 2035. This is about currently the same amount. We have about the same amount of solar power as the UK. Now, this is looking at France, pushing more towards nuclear. Now, when we look at the actual situation, half of the French nuclear reactors are currently non-operational due to breakdowns, for example, and the 6 nuclear power plants are being planned to be created anew. In the presidential election, Le Pen, which was the opposition, had an even higher nuclear plan, but President Macron was against this, so that France moving towards more nuclear, I believe, is one to maintain the nuclear technology for military use, but also they want to maintain the nuclear technology, and that nuclear power is being used for that purpose. I believe that is one of the reasons why. But in France, similar to Japan, they are facing difficulty in energy transportation, and they are relying heavily on nuclear power. However, Macron is currently saying that if they actually follow through, they will be reducing generally the reliance on nuclear and to increase renewable energy. And therefore, the same policies are being followed in France. At the very beginning of my presentation, France is also in France as well. The solar power is the cheapest source of energy. Now, this is a situation in Japan. We are trying to increase the amount of solar power and renewable energy. And this is the situation of 74 gigawatts. And in the evening, there is more wind. And this, when we look at this, by the end of 2021, 4.5 gigawatt is the actual situation for wind, which is much lower than solar. The energy crisis in Japan, currently energy prices are increasing, and we do have imports from Russia, but we are not heavily reliant on Russia. It's generally based on the increase in the fossil fuel prices in general. That is the reason for the energy cost increase in Japan. This is the comparison to other countries. The ability to supply our own fossil fuel is much lower than other countries. But when we look at the energy transformation in Japan, and when compared to other countries, we see that our position is here, which means we are about 12, and we are heavily reliant on the dams. Whereas solar and wind is going to be the cheapest form of energy, and currently is, we see that we have not developed them compared to other countries. We need to overcome our energy crisis, as well as to look at reducing our emissions. And this energy transformation is important for these two reasons. 40 to 50%, Japan is saying that they will be looking at CCS as the main form, which means the Japanese policy currently is to continue to use ammonia to be, which also comes from fossil fuels, to continue to burn energy for our electricity. In Japan currently, hydrogen as well, Japan is also looking at creating hydrogen from fossil fuel sources. These are some of the key issues that Japan is currently facing in our policies. And when we look at the overcoming the energy crisis of Japan, we need to really look at renewable energy as well as to not rely on fossil fuel derived source of energy. And in June, we were able to pass the new act for creating a new standard for construction, but these standards are still much lower than other countries, so that we actually need to make this more strong. We need to make this stronger and enforceable as well. When we look at the energy mix, the fossil fuel, we actually have a strong weakness of not having fossil fuel sources in Japan. This used to be an issue, but when we move to a new energy mix where we will not need to rely on fossil fuels, we will be able to reduce reliance on fossil fuel as well as to create less risks from terrorism as well, and also have cheaper forms of energy. This is ARENA publications. This is regarding looking at a new world of energy transformation and the geopolitics. In our society will change drastically from a structure that was heavily reliant on fossil fuel, so that the power and will also be dispersed, as well as reliance of a certain old power will also be reduced, and that this will create a dispersed type of renewable energy technology so that more people will be able to profit from this new type of society. That is these are some of the key fundamental thoughts regarding geopolitics and the new forms of energy and the new transformation of the energy.
以上です。はい、小林さんありがとうございました。
Obayashi-san, thank you very much for your presentation about Japan's energy policy.
ここから質疑応答
From here, we would like to go into a 15-minute Q&A session. We do have a limited amount of time, and so we will not be able to answer all of your questions. First question is for Jan. In Germany, how has the public opinion changed recently? And with regards to including nuclear power in taxonomy, for people that are supporting that, what are their reasons? So can you please answer that first?
Yeah, of course. So there are a lot of people who oppose the nuclear in taxonomy. So you have to differentiate between people who support the lifetime extension of the 3 reactors. That is kind of a change, but a lot of people, like over 80%, do not think that the taxonomy with nuclear is a sustainable instrument, or they don't think that nuclear power is sustainable. So there was not a big change in the public opinion. And the reasons are almost always the same, because there is a huge belief in that technology will help us to mitigate or to adapt to climate change, and that yeah, nuclear industry will find a solution to build like super safe, super cheap, super good nuclear power reactors. And these are the arguments of the people who try to push forward nuclear power. So, but there's not a lot of people in Germany who are supporting this idea right now. Was that all questions, or is there a different one?
はい、ありがとうございます。
Yes, thank you very much. The people that are in support, there are a few people, but in Germany, it's not a large number of people. And another question relating to that is, or it's about Germany.
ガスに関しては、
Regarding gas, it is not a matter of electricity, but mainly for heating. And so nuclear is mainly for electricity. And does this mean that for heating, and do you think that decarbonization is necessary for the heating section as well? What kind of discussions are happening in Germany regarding this?
Yeah, I kind of rushed through all my slides, so maybe I could talk a bit more about this point, because we have like a situation that is really short term, because the next winter is coming in like 6 months. So we need a solution for that. And we have a bit of a long-term problem. So I just talk about the way the government wants to deal with it, and then I will criticize it a bit. So the government wants to replace the gas that is needed for electricity generation. It's about 13%, and use old coal power plants for backup at this point. And they want to use the storage of the gas that we have right now for heating. And in the long term, and we need, but we also, and for the Friends of the Earth, I would say we also need a lot more energy saving and sufficiency. So this is not what the government really promoted and didn't say it really strongly, that we need this as well. And for the long run, we need also modernization of houses. We have a lot of old houses that aren't really modernized yet. We have a lot of old heating system, but we also need to get rid of fossil heating. And there could be heating pumps, but also centralized heating, and kind of using hydrogen. But mainly our point is to save energy as much as we can. And there's a huge potential still in Germany to reduce our energy consumption, especially in modernizing a lot of buildings. Yeah, that's probably, to bring it in short, there's so much still going on, but I will just leave it by that.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you very
これまでの
much.
ところ、小林さんや栗田さん。
Up until now, based on these questions, Obayashi-san, Kurita-san, do you have any comments?
はい、菅さんに質問したいんで
This
す
is
け
a
れども、
question for Jan. Right now, Greenpeace published a report, and it said that regarding the taxonomy, there was a lot of lobbying from Russia about nuclear and gas. And Germany was in support of including gas, and then France was in support of including nuclear, as well as other countries, is what I've heard. And if Russian lobbying was able to make this happen, I think that it might be difficult to include gas and nuclear in the taxonomy, but as you mentioned a little bit, Russia uses a lot of Russian fuel is used, nuclear fuel is used in Europe. And so I think that Russia is a supplier of that, and how is that part discussed within Europe?
It's I mean, the gas situation is debated kind of all over the place, like in all media, but the nuclear situation isn't really well known. So we have like 18 reactors in all over Europe, mainly in Eastern Europe, that are 100% fueled by rods from Russia. So we have a ban in Europe that you can't fly from Russia to Europe or vice versa. But there were at least 3 flights with nuclear fuel from Russia to Czech Republic, to Slovenia, and another country, I think it was Hungary, to fuel up their reactors. So there's, but this is not really well known. But as you said, the dependency in the nuclear sector is as high as in the gas sector. And we are also seeing this Greenpeace studies, which said like that is likely that the Russian gas industry will earn at least $4 billion euros a year from new gas contracts, if it helps this way. So the lobbying is quite high, and in Germany it was kind of almost all seen just on the gas part, but not on the nuclear side. So yeah.
私は私の方からは多分皆さん
I
見てら
would like to say that based on maybe what people watching are thinking, I think Obayashi-san and Jan spoke on a larger scale, but from a more smaller scale in terms of what happened after the Russian invasion took place. Just from my experience, my house we use gas for heating and electricity for various other things. Gas we are having a heating shortage as much as Germany is in Belgium, and in June my long-term contract for gas was ended, and the new price for gas was 5 times that of my previous contract. It wasn't a 50% increase, it was 5 times, and my electricity contract also ended, and that was renewed, and that was also 3 times the original price. So this is something that's actually happening. And I told this to my Japanese friend in France, and she said that it has to be a lie, it should be wrong, because if that were to happen in France, there would be riots happening. As France has capping, which means that they aren't able to raise it above a certain amount. So the situation in France is much different than that of some other countries. And so I wanted to share my example just to show that. In the winter, it's extremely cold, and if we were to build houses, there are more strict restrictions for building houses, and they need to have insulation, so it's very closed and air cannot escape. But my house was built in the 90s, and so even though my walls are 40 centimeters and there's 25 centimeters of insulation, but it still costs so much for heating, which means that I added 24 solar panels to my house. And by adding those, I took immediate action and made a purchase order, which was right after the Russian invasion, but it was supposed to happen in the middle of August, but because there was a cancellation 2 weeks ago, I was able to get the solar panels, and I've started using them last week and connected them to the grid. And based on my experience, there are some days with lots of rain, but in a week, I was able to produce enough energy for 1 week. And so I think that's a very realistic experience from Europe. Many of the houses around, about 80%, do have solar panels. And in Belgium, there's only 60 kilometers of coastline, and about 50 kilometers from the coast, there are lots of offshore wind turbines. I think we have the 4th biggest production of offshore energy in the world. And so we're doing as much as we can. And also us as individuals are doing as much as we can, and the country is doing as much as we can. I unplug all the electric appliances that I'm not using. And I think the mindset, because of Putin, has really changed how we live our everyday lives. And that's what I wanted to share. I do have some questions for Jan, but I will ask them at another time. Thank you very much. We only have about 2 minutes. And so we did get a lot of questions, but we can probably only answer one more.
今もガスの話出てましたけれど。
We had some discussions about gas just now. And in Jan's presentation, it was said that the LNG terminal and pipeline build construction, the government is in support of these. And in order to save ourselves from this current energy crisis, some people are thinking that LNG is the only solution. And so what are the opposing voices or things that we can say to people who are saying that? And what kind of strategies do we need to combat this situation?
Yeah, we're fighting against this quite long, because there was a plan like a long time ago to build LNG terminals, but now there are like 14 planned or at least in discussion, and it's kind of coming from a worse solution to another worse solution. So it's not a good way to change our energy or heating crisis with gas from fracking in the US, probably, and that will have huge environmental risks, or also gas from the Qatar, where human rights are highly on stake. And so we have to and also the CO2 emission of liquid natural gas is quite high because of the transportation and because of the processes to make it liquid and then fill it in our pipelines. So that is not the solution I would suggest to do it, but it is kind of an obvious way for politics to say, yeah, we have a technique to do it quite easy. So for us, we would point out these environmental risks and also the non-benefits for climate change protection. And we would say that, first of all, we need energy savings. I just say it all the time, but it is quite obvious to say it, because we didn't do much in the last years. And also, where we need some gas, we need to make it H2 ready, so for hydrogen use, but we don't need to build like up to so many new terminals. That's quite the wrong way. And also, there are a lot of legislation changed to make it possible to build these terminals so fast. So a lot of environmental things aren't really checked. That is also really critical for us. But also on the other hand, it takes like a long time to build new renewables. So we need to because we need to preserve the nature, and we need to check everything to not destroy nature, but we also need to build up a bit more faster renewable energies. This is the first step, and so we're not a fan of big, huge new LNG terminals here.
はい、ありがとうございました。まだまだ答えたい質問。
Thank you. There are so many other questions that we wanted to answer. But unfortunately, we have reached the end of our event. We would like to follow up and try to answer as many of your questions after the event as possible as well. I would like to ask Obayashi-san and Kurita-san to maybe make one last comment, maybe 30 seconds each. There was some question that was raised regarding solar panels being manufactured with labor that is not human rights, good for human rights, and also about how these solar panels will be disposed of in an environmentally friendly manner. And there is a lot of sites that President Online, there is also good information, and they actually clearly answer all of these issues. And our organization, our institute as well, we also create pamphlets to answer these questions. So the people who are concerned about the environmental friendliness of solar panels, please do realize that there are many sources of information to answer your concerns. Kurita-san, do you have a final comment? No comments from Ms. Kurita, so thank you very much. We have received very valuable information from Jan, Kurita-san, and Obayashi-san. And we also was able to conduct this with interpretation. We would like to thank you, all participants. One final word for housekeeping. After this event, we would like to ask you to submit your feedback regarding our event. Please do not forget to send us your thoughts. Our activities are being supported by your generous support. Please register as a supporter and also consider donating as well. Regarding nuclear power, we also have a lot of publications, both in terms of books as well as in terms of DVDs. So we would like to also consider your purchase of these items as well. We have run over time, but we sincerely would like to appreciate and thank you for your participation, and we would definitely like to